Send the boys to Cinnamon then. Episode 1.
Hello.
Hello. Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Just want to say quickly before we kick things off, really big thank you to everyone that listened to the first episode, or the pilot episode we called it.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was lovely to hear so many messages, predominantly from people we know.
Yeah, it's fine. Hello, Dad.
But it's really nice, and it's I don't know, it's really lovely. So thank you very much.
It means a lot.
Yes. The film we are discussing today, though, is Aftersun. Aftersun. A debut film from writer-director Charlotte Wells that explores the child perspective of an unravelling father, or should I say a mentally unravelling father, set against the backdrop of a holiday in 90s Turkey. It's a film that really impacted the both of us a great deal.
Yeah.
So much so that we wanted to talk about it, but felt that with the film having a limited cinema release, probably wouldn't get the traction that Avatar would, for example. However, it is coming onto Mubi on the 6th of January, which at the time of recording is tomorrow, which the release of this will coincide with that. I would implore you to get Mubi, not only for this film, but for many other great films. But I guess for the purpose of this discussion, get it for this, so you can listen to this episode.
Yeah, and watch Aftersun, because it's well worth it.
It is indeed. And also, before we move on to the break, sorry for the shit audio in the last episode.
Yeah, there was a bit of a microphone situation that we've now fixed, hopefully.
Yes.
Or made worse, who knows?
Who knows?
Questing the cinematic void.
It was a pilot episode, so it doesn't matter.
No.
The sound is pilot. It was a pilot. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not...
Leave it out.
Wait,
right?
I haven't thought about it for a good few minutes.
No.
I'm so sorry. Unacceptable.
Yes. Right, anyway. So, Aftersun. Since the sort of backdrop of the film is a classic 90s holiday, it would seem amiss not to bring our own personal experiences of our own holidays as children. Because it's one thing that this film does so well is it makes something what is quite personal, clearly to the director, Charlotte Wells, and writer, is that even if it feels personal to her, she manages to make it feel personal to you as well. Yeah,
she's kind of made it general enough so that it's going to connect with the average cinema goer, at least, especially in the United Kingdom, I'd say.
Absolutely, yeah. What's your sort of, if you could think of like a holiday memory that sort of relates to some of the sort of themes of the film, what would be your... I know that's a bit of a big question, but...
Okay. No, I do have one. I think I must have been about 6 or 7, or maybe slightly older, 'cause it's still quite fresh in my mind. Went to the south of France on like a kind of... We stayed in like a caravan, and on the holiday, much like the protagonist, or one of the protagonists, if you can call her that, Sophie sort of does, she meets a boy, and I kind of met a girl on holiday, and obviously you kind of have like crushes at that age. You don't really understand what they mean.
Yeah. And they're really intense as well, because you know they're brief.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the opportunity for that kind of situation to occur gets exemplified on holiday, because there's nothing else going on. You don't have any responsibility, especially when you're 6. So anyway, I met this girl, and I was like, clearly, I was really into her. I was like smitten, and my whole family could kind of tell. Yeah, it was at one of those kind of strange, like, kids' club holiday kind of things. Obviously your family, your parents, I should say, can kind of have a bit of respite from you. We just sort of... She was just... I remember her being really nice, and, like, we kind of got on with a whole family, and we kind of I think we had like a few meals out together. We ended up just kind of making friends, and I was on the last day of the holiday, I remember buying her a packet of sweets as a kind of like
a gesture.
I thought this is
seal the deal.
Absolutely. It's in the bag. Yes. No, but I remember the vast majority of them being made out of that weird like foam stuff you got on the Haribo eggs. And I
just Haribo egg whites.
Yeah. Well, you gotta bring out the big guns.
Oh, of course,
And I couldn't find her all day, and I couldn't give her the packet of sweets. I was like so distraught, and I kept it to myself all day. And then we went out for dinner that evening, and I just burst into tears. I was so like upset, and then by coincidence, they arrived at the same restaurant, and I was too scared to give her the sweets, so I got my brother to do it for me.
Ah, okay.
And so ended
together ever since.
And so ended my brief holiday. I don't even know. You couldn't even call it a romance, but yeah, there you go. That was mine.
I like that.
Yeah. What's your? Do you have
So
one?
yeah, we used to go camping a lot with my dad. My dad was an avid camper, and when you're at that age, when you're like 10, 11, it's like great. It's 2 years older, I realise it's rubbish.
Yeah, it's freezing.
Yeah, it's freezing and wet. But I remember really clearly because it was 2001, so I was 11. It was the day England beat Germany 5-1. Weird, you've got to hold on to that for some reason.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I can remember really vividly, and my dad, we were sat in this sort of campsite bar. I think it was like a pub with like a field behind it or something. And my dad met this fella who was an archaeologist. And obviously my dad was a huge history buff, so we would just chat away for hours. It seemed to really getting on, and I was sat with his son, and we sort of, didn't hit it off the same way our parents did, but we made the best of it. Later on that evening, after the conversation had finished and we went back to our respective tents, we were walking back. I think we were walking to the toilet from our tent, and we look out and just see this archaeologist fellow's head poking about above one of those windbreakers. and my dad, just going on the basis of the fact they've had a lovely conversation for like 3 hours in a pub, was waving at him. He didn't wave back, and this guy was like, tensing his face. And it was really weird. And my dad was like, "That's really strange." And I remember being quite keenly aware of like my dad's disappointment at being rejected, And as we walked round the windbreaker to the side, he was just revealed him just hovering over a bucket, he was just shitting in a bucket. And I just remember like his sort of milky pale thighs just hovering over this smelly bucket, just like gleaming in the moonlight. And I just remember thinking, I even said to my dad, "Look, he's having a shit. That's why he's not." I don't know why, but that'll always stay with me. I don't know why. To go from having like quite a nice evening and then to sort of it, just to be spoiled.
Yeah, just devolving into that. Oh yeah, we're camping and people that
camping.
Do this.
Yeah.
We're kind of nomads at the moment.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't blame him for it.
No,
fair enough. I mean, that is the worst part about camping: walking to the toilets. By a mile. So fair enough.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's slightly different to my story. I thought for some reason I had it pegged that yours was going to be a holiday romance as well.
With the bloke.
As soon as you just said it was with a bloke,
I was taking a turn. So, I think that's what's so great about Aftersun is that sort of way it captures the spirit of like a family holiday, in the sense that obviously there's lots of enjoyment and fun, because obviously it's an incredible privilege to go on holiday. Yeah. Even as a child, there are plenty of people that didn't do that very much in their childhood. So obviously it's not lost on you that it's a great privilege, but there's a lot of times where it is actually quite boring. Yeah. And you're sort of put in situations, or thrust into these situations where you have to socialise with other kids as bored as you are. And I just think the film does that so well. I mean, the scene where they're playing on that sort of arcade motorbike game, and that boy comes over and they have such a sort of stilted, awkward conversation, so masterfully written and beautifully acted by both, which again is something we'll talk about. The acting in this film is stellar. But I just think it's so lovely. It just reminds me of being a kid standing at an arcade machine playing Metal Slug 4. It was like 20p a go, and there'd be kids like crowding around you and wanting to go. I don't know, it really just taps into that really personal element of the holiday. Absolutely,
yeah. No, I thought it was particularly strong in terms of just almost embracing the sort of Britishness of what holidays can be sometimes. Because obviously they're in Turkey, but it doesn't concern itself too much with Turkish culture or anything like that. Right. It's just set in a holiday camp, and they're, I think she's 9, her character.
I think so. Yeah.
And so she's not there to explore ruins or anything, really. She's just there to just, they're both there just there to relax. And usually those kinds of holiday camps come with a lot of sort of criticism, but this film did a really great job of kind of, I don't know, applying some warmth to the whole thing.
I agree. Yeah, it showed the sort of I think warmth is you're dead right with the use of the word. I think, but he did it in a way that it balanced both. It balanced this sort of warmth of like being able to like sort of sit at the pool, or the random people you meet, or the sort of despicably poor entertainment they put on things. But also that idea of the sort of, it's almost like a suffocating claustrophobic boredom.
Yeah.
And you're thrust into these situations where you're like in tight spaces with your family, and even if it's supposed to be fun, it's gonna devolve into some kind of argument or some kind of issue. Like, and I just think the film did that really, really well.
Absolutely, yeah. It reminded me of, I'm not a big reader, but whenever I'm on holiday, for some reason, I can polish off like 3 novels in a week.
Yeah.
And it is probably because, like you say, holidays are, and I mean this in a very positive way, they can be quite boring. Like, you go from everyday life, which can involve, like, even when you're 9, like, you've got school, you got your friends who you know and love, and then like you say, you're just thrust into a completely new, a totally alien environment, and you're like, well, what do I do next?
Because it doesn't take long to exhaust all the options that these sorts of places provide. And if you're not going further afield out of that place, then I think they do a couple of times in the film, but most of the film is centred in that sort of holiday park space.
Yeah, at the end they do. I think right at the end, on his birthday, they go out and they actually go and do some exploring. But I get the feeling like it was mainly a holiday for her.
Yeah.
But on his birthday, they had some kind of like slightly more adult stuff planned. Like they go into a mud bath and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that. That's cool. I guess one of the biggest themes of the film, though, is I think a large part of it is from the perspective of, it's a child's perspective, I think.
Yeah.
And I think one of the great strengths of the film in that regard is how it shows that children are far more perceptive than we often give them credit for.
Yeah.
They just understand that there's much more going on, and parents do this thing where they try and shield children from the sort of more complex or even darker or more sort of nastier side of life. But these things come through eventually at some point. You can't uphold that facade forever as an adult or as a human being, even to your own children.
No, yeah.
And the way that she has to sort of read those situations, but it's clear that even if she is perceptive, she lacks the sort of real world, I guess, knowledge or life experience that helps people understand or begin to understand why things happen. Yeah. Bad things happen or good things happen. But in the case of this film, the sort of slow unravelling of her father, which is a huge theme in the film.
Yeah, big time, yeah. There's a really great moment in the film which kind of illustrates that whole thing. Is you can tell that she knows something's up.
Yeah.
But she doesn't quite know how to approach it or how to process it or how to talk to him about it, because obviously she's 9. And it's a lovely, lovely scene. And everyone talks about the end scene with the dance, but I think this is one of the best moments, is when it's his birthday. You can tell something's not quite right, and her solution is to go up to everyone else in the group and say, do you want to sing happy birthday to my dad? And they do, and it's just like he's up on this hill and they all sing for him, and it's just like so amazing, warm, but so heartbreaking at the same time.
Yeah, it is.
And it's just her way of, offering up a kind of form of love.
Trying to sort of, trying to sort of offset the difficulties that he's exposed more and more to her as the film progresses. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I love that scene. It
is lovely.
I just do you want to sing happy birthday to my dad? It's just like, fuck.
Yeah, it's hard hitting. I just think that idea that, I think in the film, the sort of, another one of the great strengths, I'll probably say great strengths about 6 times already, is again that sort of idea that as a parent you do shield your children from the sort of harsher realities. And I think in the case of the dad in this film, it's someone that is clearly struggling mentally. He's had obviously a difficult past. And these are little snippets and snapshots that, just in the way it is acted, or the little things that slip out in the script, that just give these indications that this guy's obviously he's not had it easy, and it's definitely sort of impacted him in later life.
Yeah, it doesn't ever. There's never a scene which explicitly states that he's struggling or he's unwell. Like you say, there's like a moment where he's speaking to his ex-partner and he just says, "I love you," that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think she says it back as well. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And the moment where he's buying a rug.
Yeah.
And he's just struggling with, because he really wants it, and he like clearly just wants to pay for it, but that sort of suggests there might be some financial instability with him as well. Yeah. And it's never like stated, or it just sort of flourishes and happens. Yes. And like it takes a while. It took me a while to actually realise there's something wrong here. And towards the end it gets slightly more obvious, but it never slaps it out, does it? Like,
no, and I think that's something that we must touch on. I think is this idea of ambiguity in films. I think it's a real lost art. Certainly in more modern films. I don't want that to be perceived as a sort of cynical view of the current state of the industry, but
no, you're right.
The sort of idea that that films have to sort of signpost you through. I think it's really special when a film comes along and has in its sort of glacial pacing or in its sort of subtle sort of telling signs reveals so much to you.
Yeah.
And I often think with those kind of films, it allows you to superimpose so much more of yourself onto the film, which makes it more impactful.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I felt we had to start talking about our own holidays and stuff, because the film just made it feel so easy to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it kind of bubbled up like lost memories, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of ambiguity in film, actually, there's something I did want to touch on. I think it does happen quite a lot. Even I'd say more so in with recent cinema, but it can get done wrong as well.
Yeah,
I feel like I've got some examples here. Both these are controversial. But Birdman, the ending to Birdman,
right, okay,
attempted to be ambiguous.
I actually agree with you there.
Yeah. For me, it was on reflection. I was like, why did they do that? They didn't need to. You know which moment I'm talking about. The very final shot, and you basically don't know whether he is flying or whether he's plummeted.
Yeah.
And also Alex Garland's Men. Have you seen that?
I've not seen that yet. No.
Yeah, I think that both those films could have really benefited from being more definitive with their conclusions, but they attempted like the ambiguity instead, and I think they failed. But where they failed, Aftersun really succeeds. It's a really rare example of a film that does a tremendous job of wrapping up a narrative without giving you anything definitive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think so much of the way we interact with each other or interact with problems is, I might be sort of going a bit far here, but I think we're conditioned by grand narratives in the sense that we expect to learn so much in life from these big seismic moments that come and go.
Yeah.
And they reshape our view of something, or indeed every fibre of who we are.
Yeah.
But the reality of life is it's not like that. Most of us are not going to have huge seismic moments all that often. They're going to impact us a great deal.
Yeah.
I think life is a process of slow, subtle realisations.
Yeah.
And things that, and then they sort of snowball and gain traction, and and that's when they start to impact you more and more.
Yeah.
And that's where it can inspire change, or both for the good or the bad,
Yeah.
And I think sort of bringing it back round to Aftersun, I think that's again why I love this film so much, is because it does that.
Yeah.
It's a film of quiet revelations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the way those revelations are played out, it's like no one's giving each other anything really at all, because the dad doesn't want his child, to know that he's going through something that she won't be able to understand. She just can't.
No.
As smart and brilliant as she clearly is, she's not going to get it, is she? She's just not going to.
She's not been through it herself, for a start.
Exactly.
It's also a film which holds things back and doesn't really offer up any explanations, and that actually, I think, it makes the film better. Just something that happens at the end, and there's an implication, isn't there? But it's never stated, but the general implication is, I'm going to say now, possible spoilers. It's not really a film you can spoil, but
no, I think I think you're right, but I just think to save ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so skip ahead. If you haven't seen it, go and see it. It's fantastic. But yeah, at the end, the implication is he's basically not in her life anymore.
Mm-hmm.
She's now the same age as he was when they went on holiday in the 90s, and that's all you get. And I actually feel like that's the only point that needed to be made. Nothing, you know, you didn't need to find out what happened to him.
No.
You just needed to know that he wasn't around.
Yeah.
You know, for all we know, he could be in Turkey still sipping pina coladas, or you know, just. But that doesn't matter. The point is he's not in her life anymore.
Yeah.
And it kind of just adds to that emotional gut punch at the end, I thought.
Absolutely, and throughout the film, sort of like interspersing the narrative alongside this sort of glacial pacing and these sort of tentative questions and these sort of and a lot of lounging around are scenes of her older in what seems like some kind of nightclub, dancing, well, approaching her father and then sort of almost dancing with him. They're both of the same age. I almost feel like it sort of suggests there's a self-destructive element to his character that I think is revealed then and in other little ways as well. Like the scene where he sort of says, "Oh yeah, I've got a business idea with my mate."
Oh, that's
that
right.
Sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, there's a bit on the boat as well when he says, "I'm turning 31. I don't think I'll make it to 40."
Yeah.
And it's really like just sort of springs out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and then the film rapidly kind of descends back into its normal kind of nice warm holiday.
Yeah.
And you're just like, "Oh, Jesus Christ! Like that's awful."
Yeah.
But it doesn't dwell on it at all.
No. I think one thing that I guess really struck me, and we've sort of touched on this a couple of times, about this idea as parents and adults shield their children from sort of the harsher realities. I think from the child's perspective, it's about sort of realising that the people you've put on a pedestal aren't perfect.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that because when adults do that, when they sort of shield their children and they remain this sort of figure of fun and enjoyment, kids will just think you're the best thing ever.
Yeah.
I can remember in so many situations in my childhood seeing like a family member cry for the first time, and that really, really impacting me.
Yeah.
Because you have only ever seen this person in your life as this sort of symbol of fun and joy, and you know, you almost give them like a sort of deity, godlike status in your mind because they give you so much joy, and then all of a sudden you see this completely human thing that they're doing.
Yeah.
And I can remember being really like shocked by that, to the point of just not having a clue how to respond or deal with it, you know?
Because, like, I mean, going back to what we were saying earlier, you can't help them.
No.
As much as you might want to, like you say, because they've been almost deified.
Yeah.
You want to bring them back to that status.
Yeah.
But you can't, because they're just, you know, either they're in pieces or they're, like, had a falling out or something, and it is like, they're formative moments sprinkled across your kind of the first 10 years of your life.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's those moments that start to sort of, you start to realise that there is a bit more, and this might sound a bit morbid, but there's a bit more sort of difficulty in life coming than you realise.
Yeah, definitely.
I think you're sort of, I don't know, like, I don't want to say conditioned, because that sounds a bit sort of apocalyptic, but I think in sort of school, there's these rules and these sort of expectations that are placed, and not just like rules like, you know, don't rub shit on the walls, or whatever, but like rules like, you know, you don't say this, don't be like this, you know, be a bit more, you know, sort of almost getting children to sort of build that sort of outward facade of sort of normalcy before they've even like become an adult, you know. So there's already these expectations that are placed on you throughout your educational life. Then you go home, and that's probably reinforced by your parents, depending on the situation of your parents, of course. But you know, I think, and then all of a sudden you start to see these cracks, and you start to realise, oh, okay, this is different, and this feels, and it's almost like, I don't know, whenever I think about those moments, it feels like a kind of a bit of foreshadowing. Not in the sense that my life has been constant dread or pain, thankfully. But I just mean that in the sense that, as fun as it can be, there's difficulties coming up, and you have to sort of begin to understand those difficulties or how to respond to them.
I think, like, again, Aftersun approaches that with real grace. It doesn't ever lapse into kind of dramatic territory. But it does, the majority of the film does just kind of illustrate how difficult I can imagine. I'm not a parent at all, but I can imagine it being really tough sometimes to kind of keep this mask on of ultimate strength and ultimate, because you probably need that in order to enact discipline as well.
Yeah.
So without that kind of strength, you're not going to be able to tell them off, basically.
Yeah.
And it is, I mean, ultimately the father figure in this film is called Callum, is struggling to the nth degree to keep this up, and he's almost at breaking point. And she's then of the age where I think I probably was as well, when you, like you say, you start to see the cracks appear. One thing I really wanted to mention, this actually is kind of interesting. Charlotte Wells, in a number of interviews, has sort of talked about the earlier versions of the screenplay, and how there was a lot more kind of overt conflict in the script that she kind of ultimately chose to remove because it was morphing into a film she didn't want to make. And I don't know about you, but I think this kind of benefited the film massively, because if the film was concerned with like conflict and, combined with that heartbreaking ending, it would have actually made for a really miserable kind of kitchen sink experience.
Yeah.
And removing that edge probably really mellowed the majority of the film out, and also kind of brought forward those warmer themes about childhood memories and childhood curiosity about the world around them.
Very nice. I like that. Yeah, that's great. No, I sorry, I'll repeat that if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I really like that a lot. I think that idea about childhood memories staying with you.
Yeah.
There's, like you said, they're formative moments. They sort of sculpt you, don't they? And they permeate throughout your life.
Yeah.
And I love that the film isn't cynical. It isn't depressing. And obviously, it's difficult. Yeah. It shows you a more sort of nuanced version of someone struggling with their mental health. They still have the capacity to be a decent, wonderful, kind human being. And there's that wonderful scene where he says to her, "You can be whatever you want, and I'll support it."
Yeah.
Even no matter what's happened, no matter the more destructive aspects of his personality or who he is, there's still that wonderful, positive side of him that she has chosen to embrace and hold dear to her. Because it's clear, because it's even it's a sort of subtle cue, but the sort of, you can see the rug that he buys is in the living room.
That is good. So I didn't know that.
Just those little subtle telling things. I just think it's such a lovely little, again, just those little snapshots that sort of just give you just enough to sort of understand the headspace of the characters, but not in a way, like you say, that is like definitive. Because it's impossible to be definitive about him.
No.
And I think she might find that impossible, her character, given that she was a child. And I don't know. I think that's how these sorts of things should be represented. If the best way to represent them is this. Not to just wallow in the horror of it necessarily, but to also focus on a more rounded view, as all human beings are. As trite and cheesy as that is.
No. I think you're totally right. It is not a film, despite what you might think and what people might tell you. It's actually a really lovely film. The majority of it is really nice. It does it does retain a slight thread of what was originally in the screenplay. I think the conflict that she originally intended to put in. Apparently, that scene where she drops the mask out of the boat. Apparently, that was originally meant to be like an argument between the two, and he was going to be really annoyed about it. But she chose to remove that. But there's a tension still there, and you can tell he's really like gutted that he's lost this expensive scuba diving mask. But he doesn't. You don't need to build on that anymore.
No, you can tell by his reaction that it's bothered him. But again, he wants to uphold this this sort of creaking sort of facade, I guess.
Definitely. And this kind of, it happens a lot, like the bit where the karaoke scene is I think that's probably the most overt moment, isn't it?
Yeah. Where he does show that frustration. And I think it's key to have that moment in, because it's not a big blown up moment, but it's a moment where he just for context, I mean, I'm sure if you've seen the film, you'll know, but they have this sort of ritual when they go on holiday there that they sing together. Yeah. And they go out in front of all these holiday makers and sing a karaoke song together. And obviously in this particular moment he is not feeling up for anything like that whatsoever.
Yeah, no.
And she really sort of badgers him almost to go on the stage, the way children do, because they're just excited. They just want to involve you in things, and he sort of not flies off the handle by any stretch, but he does sort of like sternly. Probably one of the few times he's quite stern with her, say, "I'm not doing this."
Yeah.
And it's not from a point of discipline. It's from a point of, I'm not feeling great. I don't want to do this. And then she goes down and she sings, and it's just really, really sad. And you can tell he starts to regret that sort of.
He does.
He's sort of pulling himself out of that sort of quagmire and sort of going, actually, I should have probably done that. You know.
Yeah. He's drinking, isn't he? That's what, because he drinks in the film, but in that moment it's slightly troublesome how much he's sinking down. But this is it. Like it's peppered with these moments, and a lot of the film I actually thought something terrible was going to happen because of this sort of DNA of unease. I thought one of them was going to drown. I thought he would never, when he like wanders off that night, I thought he was never coming back.
I did think there was something going on there.
But he does, and it's like it's strange because it kind of enables you to tap into his mental state a little bit of this sort of like the parallel lines of Holiday and presumably like horrendous mental instability.
Yeah.
But this is it. It is, although Sophie is very much the protagonist, it's definitely a film about Callum as well. And there's a great moment at the end, which I'm kind of, again, massive sort of spoilers at the moment now. But if you've seen it, you'll remember the sort of 360-degree camera move at the end, which starts on DV footage that he's been shooting throughout the film, and it kind of pans across to her watching it back when she's 31, and then when it pans back, it's him. It's him filming it at the airport terminal, and he puts the camera away, leaves, and goes into. When the doors open, you see a sort of glimpse of the rave which happened earlier, and it's you're sort of saying goodbye to him more than her in those sort of closing moments, and without that sense throughout the film that something was going to go wrong, I don't feel as if that ending would have had nearly as much of an impact.
Yeah. It's the implication that it's almost like he's coming out of that way of life for a breath of fresh air. Yeah. And then he's going back underwater. And it takes a lot to bring him out of that. And I think it's such a great ending. I just thought it was excellent. And that camera move was, just from a technical perspective, stunning.
Yeah, really interesting.
It really served the film's purpose. And I think cinematically, the film isn't especially flashy. There's obviously some wonderful compositions and framing, but I think in terms of like camera move, the sort of dynamism of the camera isn't particularly noticeable until the sort of later stages of the film.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I agree with you.
And I think that's almost like testament to Charlotte Wells as a director, that she's able to sort of restrain the camera in a way that feels like it's sort of aiding the themes of the film. She's restraining the camera, and then she's unleashing it in that final scene with that sort of camera move, and it just feels so apt and perfect. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, if I was in Turkey, I wouldn't be shooting a film like that. I mean, I'm not a filmmaker really, but I would have been like very flashy with the way I made it. I would have been like, sort of soft focus on the sea and like 2:35:1 aspect ratio, but like no, she really does make it hones it in very much with these two characters instead.
It's a lesson in restraint, isn't it? I think, which I think is really important, and something that I think just shows how even the simplest techniques with the right mindset behind them can reveal as much as the sort of dynamic camera moves. Yeah, definitely. The more dynamic camera moves in films, probably. I did have. This may shock you. I did have one or two criticisms, and I'm keen to hear this because you mentioned this before.
Yeah,
and I hadn't really thought about it because I was so sort of overwhelmed by the thematic elements of the film that I hadn't really thought about the film critically at all. So I'm quite interested to hear your views.
Yeah, they're nitpicky.
Well,
and they are actually. I mean, I don't want to give off the impression that these are big problems at all.
Right,
it might be my problem, if anything.
Well,
Yeah. So the first one is actually something we've touched on already, The rave, the dance, the kind of seizure-inducing flashing light sequences.
Yeah.
I thought they were a bit like Tate Modern. You know what I mean? I thought they were a bit much. They were easing because the rest of the film is so like kind of linear and so real, and then it did take me out of it a little bit when all of a sudden I was presented with these really abstract, flashing images, and I don't know whether maybe they could have been done a little bit more gracefully.
Could they have been? I mean, the only thing I was thinking about that would be if they were done in a nightclub, for example. Maybe too literal.
Maybe.
In terms of the themes of the film.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying. I think, because we talked about this actually on the sort of, on the way over to recording, as we spoke about how independent cinema, there are some films that are just so independent it's insufferable.
Yeah.
And the sort of devices they employ and the things they do.
Sort of a bit almost studenty.
Yeah. It's like showing off that they can like do these things to the point that it's sort of, it damages the quality of what they had originally.
Yeah.
So I think from that perspective, I can see where you're coming from. I personally quite like it because it feels sort of surreal and otherworldly.
Okay.
And it sort of ties into this idea that she sort of dreams about it almost. And I think when you think about it like that, personally to me, that would suit it more than to do it in a more sort of grubbier setting.
Yeah.
Personally. But I can see where you're coming from because it does... Just stylistically, it's so different from the rest of the film. So
yeah. It does. It sort of feels like it belongs in a different film from my perspective. But then again, I was thinking about this. I don't know how else they could have done it either without making it worse. So that's my first criticism. The second one, again, really nitpicky, and actually, I think I might be wrong because based on what we've discussed, it sort of broadened my understanding of the whole thing. I know you have a bit of a problem with that kind of child genius in film. Cliche.
Yeah.
And
really
when
don't like it.
like so basically when children in film inexplicably talk and act like adults with a screenwriting master's degree, like they just sort of it's not how a child speaks. No. And this is, I might be remembering the film completely wrong, but I do think occasionally it might have lapsed into that a little bit. Yeah.
Because I really thought the dialogue, because I've got a keen eye for that sort of shit.
Yeah.
But I think personally that the way the dialogue was so cryptic,
in
the sense that they're sort of not giving too much away to each other at certain points, and I don't know, like I felt like a lot of it felt quite tentative and real. Like the questions she'd asked were quite sort of tentative and didn't feel too much like there was someone older writing her.
Okay.
But I can certainly see where you come from, because I think in a way when you're writing, I mean, again, I'm not a writer by any stretch of imagination, but I can imagine when you're writing those kind of scenes with children, you still have to be concerned with plot and moving things forward slightly.
Yeah.
Even an independent film like this with deliberately sort of wonderfully slow pacing, which is so important to the film, but even then you're going to be thinking, we need to sort of keep this going.
Yeah.
So maybe there will be moments. I might rewatch the film with that in mind.
Yeah, I'd be interested. It's just based on a memory I had, and I might have actually come out of the film not thinking that at all. But at the same time, she's 9, and she's really, really inquisitive, and that's fact. But 9-year-olds can and almost certainly are really inquisitive and very observant, and especially in the case of her character, and it pays for her character to be that way because of obviously what her dad's going through and how she reacts to that. So maybe it actually served the film really well, and I was just remembering it wrong.
Well, but, I think to sort of go on the back of what you just said there, I think if you're a kid that's from a product of like a divorce or a breakup, I think it makes you a bit more like that.
Yeah.
When you're sort of more aware of emotional difficulty. I don't know. That's just a little side thought. But,
that's true. Yeah. No.
I think you are sort of like, because you're sort of trying to piece together why that happened in the first place.
Yeah.
And obviously, like we've said several times before, you've only got your childlike perspective to sort of weigh in on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, no, that is interesting, actually. I didn't think about it that way. I wanted to ask one more question.
Go for it, then we'll wrap it up.
Do you think, when she's leaving the airport, she's going back to a kind and loving mum?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. And it's funny you asked that question, because I was going to sort of say it just after, but it's like, I feel that these are just two people that are trying to do the best by her.
Yeah.
And there's obviously suggested issues between them. Obviously, they're split up for a reason, right? There's never not a reason.
Of course.
And we never hear much about her, so obviously it's all down to sort of speculation.
Yeah, totally. And which is one of the film's strengths.
Agreed, yes. But I love that you asked that question. I think it's a really interesting question. I just think that, looking at it, I feel that it might be more on him.
Yeah.
That they split up.
I do totally agree with you, actually.
And it might be unfair, I don't know. Obviously it's all, but that's the sort of impression I get.
It's funny because usually in a scene like that, at an airport terminal, you'd want to draw the emotion from the fact that she might be going back to a place of danger, but I didn't get that at all from this. I distinctly got the feeling that she was going back somewhere safe.
Yeah.
And the kind of raw power of that ending more came from him.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was almost left behind. Which, it was a really nice, really refreshing way to do a scene like that, and to kind of end the film that way. Shout out also to the music in that. I've been humming it all day. I don't know why. It's a really No, cut that out. It's fantastic, but very emotional piece of music. Just 6 notes on a violin. But I don't know why. There's a bit of music at the end that plays over the end credits. It's just, it works so well. I feel. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. Well, there we have it. Aftersun. Brilliant film. Again, out on Mubi on January the 6th.
That's,
I think.
January the 6th. Yes.
Good. Please go and watch it. If anything, to support independent filmmaking, just also taking a film that I think will probably speak to a lot of people about the things that we've sort of just discussed.
Absolutely, yeah.
It might be a bit presumptuous, but I think it really will. So please go and watch it.
And look out for the sequel, Sudocrem, coming soon to a Boots near you. Questing the cinematic void. Fantastic. We should probably mention, in the last podcast we said this would be fortnightly. We're acutely aware that it's been less than a fortnight.
It's been less than a week.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think we're obviously just excited to be doing this, but there are going to be some things coming up, personal things coming up, that are probably going to make the recording episodes a bit trickier.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
We just felt that whilst we have the free time, that's not to say we're going to stop recording in that period. It just meant that whilst we've got the free time, let's just get them out there.
Absolutely. If we've got something on our minds, Aftersun's going to be on my mind for a really long time.
Yeah.
I feel almost a lot better about the film now. That, not that the film was a negative thing, but it is very tough to, navigate. And I feel a lot better now. I've sort of hashed it out and talked about it. So
I hope you feel the same by listening to it. Who knows?
Yeah.
So, in classic Cineboys fashion, we are again looking ahead to the next episode, which is a bit of a blinder, we think. As January is a bit of a shit time for films.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of alright films, but we're going to sack those off in favour of a more broader discussion this time.
Yeah.
So we're going to discuss the impact of cultural nostalgia, particularly on films, of course.
Yeah.
And how that has impacted the films that we are watching and our relationship with films, whilst also discussing the nature of nostalgia itself and, how positive is it? How positive an impact does it have on our lives?
Yeah. And how negative of an impact does it have as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
So tune in for that one.
Absolutely.
But in the meantime, have a lovely weekend. And you'll probably hear us sometime next week.
Yeah, I think next week. Next week's a good shout.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. See ya.
Bye.
Questing the cinematic void.
Hello. Just a quick audio PS of sorts. We triumphantly apologised for the audio being rubbish, as if to suggest we'd fixed it. You can tell by this episode we haven't. We don't know what we're doing. Oh, fucking hell, right, we keep it steady. We believe we've figured out the issue. I think we had the mics too close together. I don't know.
Next episode, we're putting them even closer together.
Yes, you can hear. Yeah. So yeah, sorry about that. We'll figure it out. Well, yeah, we're still green. Leave us alone.